And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here with another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. And today we've got a huge show. Somebody who I've been after since the very beginning, 3 years ago when we started doing this show. I wanted to have on here as a guest, and finally broke him down. Finally got him to come on and talk with us. And maybe it was worth the wait, because this has been a huge story over the last couple of weeks. Tony Bragalia from UFO Explorations got a response to a FOIA request that he filed 3 years ago. We're going to get into all the details of that. It's kind of a long, nuanced story, and hopefully we get everything right so you have a clear understanding of what's been going on with all this, and some of the attention and some of the backlash and this and that. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to bring Tony Bragalia right on here. Tony, thanks for doing this. It's been a long time coming.
Hey, Frank. Very, very delighted to be here, and it has been a long time in coming, but it's a story that needs to be told, and I'm glad that I'm here to tell it for you. We should just begin at the beginning. This has been a crazy story in the past 2 weeks. It's kind of gotten even worldwide attention. But, basically what happened, Frank, was that way back in, I want to say, late 2017, the New York Times, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal were two reporters that ran an investigative report on the existence of a Pentagon program that dealt with UFO study. And it was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP, and the program ran for a number of years under a number of different names, and it involved millions of dollars. And one of the things that came out of it was a few videos. What do they call it? The Tic Tac video? Is that what they call it?
And there are a couple others as well.
And a couple others, but within this article was a buried mention of anomalous material recovered from UFOs, which was stored in what the Times said, quote, were specially modified facilities by a private defense contractor that's now defunct, called Bigelow Aerospace in Nevada. And so that little kind of buried mention of UFO or UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, material within the Times article got me very interested, because I've always been interested in the debris and the physical evidence of this phenomena for years. The witness stuff is nice, but when you're dealing with actual physical evidence, that's really nice. And so what I did is I initiated a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA, with the Pentagon, and I asked for a, quote, physical debris recovered by personnel of the Department of Defense as residue, flotsam, or shot-off material, or crashed, unidentified flying objects. And it couldn't be more clear. And then 3.5 years later, I got back from the Defense Intelligence Agency over 150 pages of technical reports on some pretty exotic metal and material that they have been examining in terms of potential applications of this kind of material. And so that's kind of in a nutshell, what led me here and where I'm at now. The information I got back from them was a little bit overwhelming. They basically were talking about material that I have talked about and Frank's talked about for a long time, which is this memory metal, or shape recovery alloy, which a lot of witnesses at Roswell said that they encountered. This kind of material that when you hold it and you crunch it up or deform it, it returns back to its original state. And lo and behold, I get back in part about 20 pages of information on nitinol, which is a shape recovery alloy, much like the very alloy that was recovered at Roswell. So I was pretty surprised at that one.
Let's jump back sort of to the beginning, because this was not an accident that you happened to decide to file this particular FOIA request based on that particular fragment of information in that December 17 New York Times story. You've been on this a while, going right back to the Roswell case and what happened in the immediate aftermath of that, and the work, the little network that was in existence between Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the Battelle Memorial Institute. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, because you've got a tremendous background in this, and like I said, it's not an accident that you followed up on this particular lead. So why don't you talk about how you got into all that?
There's a precedent for it. About 12 years ago, I starting to examine the memory metal. At that time, I had collected about maybe 42 witnesses that had reported this kind of material over the years, and I just got to thinking that there's got to be something more to this. And so what I did, along with a reporter, a friend of mine, and a UFO enthusiast named Billy Cox here in Florida, we both filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and that was for progress reports that were being done by Battelle Memorial Institute in the year after the Roswell crash. I had seen some mentions in some technical papers, some references to what are called phase diagrams or recipes to make alloys. And one of them looked like an awful lot like the phase diagram that you would use to make nitinol, which is nickel and titanium, or nitinol, niti. And that got me real curious, so did a little bit of creative backtracking of the technical literature, and arrived at the back door of Wright-Patterson, where I found out that in 1948, about 10 months after the crash, they had let out a contract to Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio, which is a quasi-private organization that runs 6 of our national laboratories. And so basically found out that they were toying around with nickel and titanium, and that became a phase diagram that was later used as a basis for a few years later, about 10, 12 years later, at the Navy, using that very same recipe to make what we call nitinol, which today can be a material that you can find in things like bendable eyeglasses. They're even using it now in heart stents. There are all kind of applications for it. And so, this idea of physical evidence, UFO debris, and being able to access information on that through FOIA is something that I had an idea about, years ago. And it paid off, Frank. I mean, basically what happened was that when Billy and I got back the report, we found that what they were trying to do is to purify titanium to a level that had never been accomplished before, and ultra high purity titanium is required to create shape memory metal. And so the particular scientist that was working on purifying the titanium was a scientist named Elroy John Center. And later, much later, he had confessed to his family and to some close friends that while at Battelle, lo and behold, he had been involved in the analysis of what he felt was material that couldn't have been from Earth, even though his bosses told him that it was from the Russians, which we've heard before as an excuse. So, that was kind of that story. And then, all these years later, I get back a FOIA response which includes material on this shape memory alloy, and among other types of material. Beyond the memory metal, there was other indications of something called a metamaterial in this new FOIA, that basically is a material that can be used in a lot of different ways. It's a metamaterial is a coined word. It's a relatively recent word, and it's believed to mean any material that's engineered to have a property that isn't found in naturally occurring materials. And so some of these materials that they've been looking at apparently have properties that could slow down the speed of light or may induce invisibility by manipulating refraction and reflectivity and increasing light absorption. And other of the material have an ability to compress electromagnetic energy so that you can condense information and energy storage and make it smaller and make it transfer faster. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. And then the other portions of the report centered on a next generation of what are called amorphous metals, or liquid metal, and it kind of runs like water. And I'm reminded of one of the witnesses that Kevin Randall talked to. Her name was Frankie Rowe, and she told Kevin that when she held the material from Roswell in her hand, that it felt like it was liquid metal, like it ran like water. So I thought that was another kind of interesting little confirmation of material that had been seen before and now is being reported on in these reports. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And as far as when you're acquiring this information from some of the witnesses, and you said you've got about 42 of them,
yeah.
It's not too likely that these folks are reading advanced scientific papers and describing these properties based on how they're staying on top of the latest in metallurgical developments.
Absolutely, that's the whole thing that struck me, and that's really what led me to all this. Is that these people were separated by time and by distance. Some of them were elderly. I mean, how in the world would they even have any concept of shape memory alloy or shape recovery or memory metal? Just the idea of it. I mean, you could walk down the street and ask 50 people about it today, and I think very few people would even know about it. They might know about bendable eyeglasses, but they wouldn't know much more than that. I mean, that was the remarkable thing. When you kind of step back from it all and just look at it, like you've just said, and the people that have been involved over the years reporting this material time and again, and they don't even know each other. I mean, these are people that have talked to independently to different people over the decades, and yet you hear the same theme over and over again. So yeah, that was pretty wild.
So the story came out and it generated a lot of attention, but it also generated, not surprisingly, some criticism. And let's get into that a little bit. It was criticized to the point where some individuals, in particular John Greenewald at the Black Vault, decided to actually do some following up. And I'm going to read a line from his comment on this, because frankly, John's in over his head on this subject. This is a little bit too much for him. To be blunt about it. But here's a quote from an article that he wrote about this. Regardless of any truth to his new claims and evidence, nothing he has put forward disproves the Pentagon or Dr. Puthoff's stance that this material, and I think in this context he's talking about the material you received as a result of the FOIA, not any particular metal or anything along those lines, is not related. And even if I'm wrong, it is still, this is what he's writing here is not accurate at all. That this material is not related to UFOs or UAPs. And he was able to get a quick response from Sue Guff from the Pentagon. She's a Pentagon spokesperson, and you've had some dealings with her. I'll read it really quick. Those appear to be copies of a legitimate FOIA request and the response provided to the requester. Well, they were. I mean, they were legitimate FOIA requests. We know that. A couple of them had been released already, and also the full list of these defense intelligence reference documents had been out before, and obviously the titles matched mixed up. So we're able to figure out, who the authors were, even though the names of the authors were actually redacted in the copies that you got. It gets a little bit complicated, but some of the ones that were out were essentially leaked. They were essentially made public through somebody who happened to have possession of them, and were not formally released by the Pentagon. So that's kind of an important thing to note there. And then she goes on to say, the testing referred to in the documents released by the Defense Intelligence Agency under the FOIA was of known materials conducted for study purposes pursuant to the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program's mission of establishing a center of expertise for advanced aerospace technologies. This is a partial truth, I would say, not the whole truth, because
I agree with that.
Because we know that the ATIP was a UFO program. There's no question about it, and I'll back that up as we go forward. But when you're seeing some of these responses coming out, what was your response to the response?
Yeah, there are so many of them. My first thing that I would say is that I have attempted to reach Susan Gogh repeatedly, and she has refused to contact me or to return my phone calls or emails, which I think is kind of appalling. She's seen fit to talk to other people and release these kinds of cryptic comments, but the very individual that filed the FOIA, she has seen fit to not communicate with. I'd also add that in terms of John Greenwald, he also never saw fit to contact me before he released his video analysis of this material, this information. And, of course, that is also unconscionable. It's very easy to get a hold of me. People that know me know that. People that don't know me can get a hold of me through my website. And that he did not try to call me or contact me in any way before releasing his critique is surprising, I guess. Anyone that does this kind of journalistic work, and John isn't a journalist, so I can appreciate that, but you always try and get the other side and try and develop a dialogue. It's real important to do that. So I'd characterize John as very unprofessional in that way. Kind of surprising in that he's so detail-oriented, but he never saw fit to even contact me. So there you go on that.
I'll point out one of the other nails that the nails in the coffin of basically destroying this story. There was also an interview between George Knapp and Bob Bigelow recently that Knapp published over at Mystery Wire. I'm going to be a little critical of Knapp here in terms of his interviewing style at times. This is basically a question for Bigelow. New York Times reported that you modified your facility here in order to house some material from somewhere else. That's pretty vaguely worded. Was somewhere else? What does that mean? Did you ever have it? And Bigelow responds, "We never had any." Which he doesn't actually address. Well, did they modify the facility? Did they test something? And did it come back, ordinary or mundane? Certainly, there's no question he did that when he ran NIDS. They absolutely acquired material and had it tested. And
he's being coy, Frank, and I think that he talks out of two sides of his mouth. There's no question about it. I tried to reach out to Mr. Bigelow, obviously, before I published, and was unable to do so. I was able to talk to his former general counsel, who was very lawyerly and didn't reveal much. But,
or if he even knows that much, he might. Right. He's probably pretty well compartmentalized himself,
himself, But I wanted to dive into some of these criticisms that John and others have levied on this disclosure.
Yeah. Before you do, there's one.
Sure.
There's one last one I've got. He also contacted Hal Puthoff. Puthoff's response is that the 5-sided DIRDs that we commissioned addressed advanced material topics potentially significant for advanced aerospace application, not evaluation of UAP debris in hand. And again, that's probably a partial truth.
Well, it is.
Hal Puthoff's a UFO guy. He's with Through the Stars
Right.
Academy as well. He's still with them. He's one of the holdovers that didn't jump ship in December. And okay, he's saying that they didn't have any UAP debris in hand. That's fine. But obviously, putting together these different DIRDs and commissioning these different DIRDs, this absolutely was informed by their knowledge of what makes UFOs tick. And I mean, Puthoff, and he's worked with Jacques Vallée, and Jacques Vallée was involved in this program. Jacques Vallée's got a full book coming out in in a couple months about the UFO debris research that he's done. So what are these guys talking about here? And one other thing, I put a little. Actually put some effort into some of these visuals that I've got. You can't see them, but the folks who are watching the video will. This goes back to Greenewald pointing out that there was a little bit of conflict between Harry Reid and the New York Times regarding a quote that he was attributed to him regarding UFO debris, and they did do a retraction based on what they used. But it's important to note, and Greenewald did not do that the authors of the article, Blumenthal and Keene, both stood by the quote, even though the Times retracted it. So that's important to note, too.
Yep. That is my understanding.
That happened as well.
But, all of these folks might be correct in that they've blended or laundered the research on extraterrestrial material into applications for military use. And they're studying UFO debris under the cover of materials research for defense applications. And they've kind of integrated them to obscure the truth that these materials represent our best efforts to replicate them to the military's advantage. And, they've gotten all kind of various program names over the years: the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. And these are all kind of confusing the missions of these programs. At various points in time, these programs can involve UFO study, weapons research, airborne enemy threats. So, Frank, it allows the Pentagon to answer an inquiry in any way they want to. That's kind of what's going on. And, I would say immediately to everybody who is looking at my material, really look at it. Because if you were to read the FOIA request and the reply, there was only mention, and I've said this dozens of times, only mention of UFOs, UAPs, Bigelow Aerospace, debris, and testing. There's never anything ever mentioned whatsoever in either the request or the reply about aero materials or defense metals or weapons programs. Nothing whatsoever to do about that. When I've shown this to people that aren't into ufology, and they read my request, and they read the reply and the accompanying reports, everybody, without question, says that you would have to be the most inept and careless clerk or a FOIA professional to read these requests and think anything else other than what I'm referring to was UFOs. Either the Pentagon people that fulfill these requests lack basic reading and comprehension skills, or they don't have the ability to review for compliance and for fulfillment of these requests. I mean, anyone that reads these that has basic reading skills would understand that, we're referring to UFO material, debris.
Yeah.
We are not referring to nose cones or the hull of an aircraft, the skin of an aircraft, nothing like that whatsoever. Now, like you point out, they may at this point be one and the same thing. They folded this research in so much that it's hard to tell now.
Right.
But there's another thing that's going on that, by the way, I do want to say that when people say that the reports have nothing to do with UFOs, that when you look at them, no, they don't mention UFOs, but the materials that we're developing are based on our previous study of UFO debris, and there is mention of UFO material applications within the documents. And this is where the problem is, and I really want to address this because people in ufology are a little bit naive about material science and engineering. There's something called basic research and applied research. And basic research is the area of science that conducts discovery. They do first time ever attempts at analysis to find out how things work. But then there's applied research, and that's the area of science that takes the information that's learned from basic science and looks for potential applications and ways to feasibly use that information to our benefit. So what I received weren't basic science reports. These were applications engineering reports. They didn't tell me how these things were made, only how we may one day be able to use them. And so when you look at this, it is about UFOs, material that can promote invisibility. Well, that's why UFOs can pop in and out of view at their will, visually and on radar. And material that manipulates the speed of light. Well, light speed and UFO interstellar travel are completely interlinked. And then we talk about material that can morph. Well, that kind of material would allow a UFO craft to adapt to the environment in which it's traversing. It could self-heal. You can actually prevent a sonic boom by using morphing material. With shape-shifting material, you can make things bigger inside than outside. And again, the fact that this kind of metal was found fallen at Roswell, and that it's part of a response to a FOIA request on UFO debris tests decades later, is pretty wild. And then they talk about material that can compress electromagnetic energy. Well, energy storage is a big technical challenge. It's one of the greatest issues for all airborne craft. So you look at these things that they talk about in the reports, and no, they're not basic research telling you what the stuff is, but what they are things that are telling you how to use these things in the future. And that's where the problem is. This is where the problem is. I really think people like Greenwald believe that they're going to mention, the rancher Mac Brazel, who found the craft at Roswell. I mean, it's just not that way. These are science and engineering reports.
And when you look at the full list of these defense intelligence reference documents, you also see papers like traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energies. Come on. High-frequency gravitational wave communications. And this is actually an important thing that I want to mention, is that these papers are older now. I mean, these papers are 12 years old now. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's no longer the cutting edge.
People are saying to me, and this is the other comment that people have said, is that these reports that were sent many of them were already made public. It's been pointed out that that prior to the FOIA release, that on a few obscure science and paranormal sites that they've been out there. But the fact remains that these same reports were sent in direct response to a FOIA request on UFO debris study. And it solidly connects the two in my mind. And some of the technical material is out there, and it should be out there. Because I do believe that, 70 years on after the Roswell crash, there has been I'm not talking about a Phil Corso-like, but a technology transfer of lessons that have been learned from ET material study. It's already occurred, and it's continuing. There is a controlled release of technical information. It spurs innovation. It ultimately seeps benefit into the private sector. But these documents weren't even classified. These were just official use only. And they were circulated among, theoretical physicists in academia that were contracted to government. And, I'm not getting where people have a problem with that, because once they're deemed suitable for general release, of course they're going to trickle out to a larger audience. I mean, that's the whole idea. And to be honest with you, these guys who were doing this, even Hal Puthoff, wasn't even born when the crash happened. I mean, these folks have no idea what the extraterrestrial impetus or origin of their work is. I mean, much of their work represents the continuation of work that was begun decades before they were even born.
Of course, of course.
So that's how far down we are.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. You have the founding of a commercial titanium industry a year and a half after Roswell.
Yes, you pointed it out. Remarkably well.
And also I'm looking a lot more at this period between that date and the development of nitinol, and it's really quite astonishing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I did spend a lot of time about that on the last show, and there's more on the way. So I've got more on that.
But keep it coming to me. I'm still interested
definitely.
in that. Because that's another thing people say. Oh well, wasn't there memory metal before '47? Well, there was pseudoelasticity, meaning metals are bendable, but there was never anything even close to shape memory. And if there was ever anything like that, it was an accident or an afterthought. They were not trying to do it before 47.
And a lot of times this type of thing is sort of the tipping point. They've got these curiosities, or somebody's always way ahead of the curve and is working on something, but they can't figure out a practical, profitable application for it.
Yes.
And then you get this tipping point, and then all of a sudden, some people with the money, and it's basically we're talking about the military here. All of a sudden, they want it, and then all of a sudden, it becomes profitable. It was the U.S. Air Force, the military, the Pentagon, that got the titanium industry started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so these things, as you point out, have happened decades ago, and over the years, people that are working on these kinds of projects have no idea that the impetus for their work was from many, many years ago. I mean, and they shouldn't know about this stuff. In terms of the way it really is in the world of science and engineering, you're really not given all kinds of backstories. One of the reasons I know that Bob Lazar is a phony, among other reasons, is because he talks about being tasked to do certain technical things, but then he's also talking about being given information about things that don't relate to science or engineering. Things like beings from distant stars, and maybe Jesus was an ancient astronaut, and this kind of thing. And he's being told all of these things by scientists supposedly at Area 51. Well, that's not the way science works, and that's not the way engineering works in the real world. You're given a very small project to work on. Your boss might even not know what you're working on. It's that compartmentalized. You're given a top secret clearance, full scope polygraph, and a special access program where you're to work only on one particular thing. They're not going to fill you in on the backstory of ancient aliens when you're working on
Right.
perhaps a debris or something. It
Or,
just doesn't work
or
like
if you
that.
are told something like you mentioned with the Elroy Center that it's Russian, well, I can tell you
Yes.
that my research indicates that the Russians were trailing on the development of advanced alloys through that period.
They sure were. In fact, this whole idea that Annie Jacobsen had years ago of the Roswell crash being resultant from a Russian vehicle or drone, you'll remember that.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Just ridiculous on the face of it. They weren't anywhere near that able to do that kind of thing. But that's a whole other story, isn't it? So.
Yep.
So when I hear about Hal Puthoff and others talking about this released material, I can truthfully say that yes, there are aeronautical applications, and they are working on these materials for that reason. But that doesn't negate the UFO angle. And one of the things I mentioned before, Frank, is that they like to change up the names of these programs. And one of the names on the programs that kept on coming up was the other program name I'm forgetting here. The
OSAP?
Yes. And one of the people that was involved in that was the predecessor to Louis Elizondo.
Oh, that's James Lukatsky.
There you go, and that's the name I was looking for. Thanks, Frank. In the DIA response, it says this product is one of a series of advanced technology reports produced under the Defense Intelligence Agency Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program. And we know who's blocked out, whose name is blocked out in that block there,
Right.
and that is Lukatsky's. And he was involved in UFO study, as was Elizondo. He was his predecessor. So I believe that's why they removed his name from what I received, because I've seen other documents that include his name in this very same DIA response block, which has this product as one of a series of advanced technology reports. His name is included in other of those. It's removed in the one I received.
As were the authors of the papers, too, but it was easy enough to put two and two together, and figure out who the writers were.
If you simply put his name in and insert his name, it's clear that these reports relate to UFO material.
Yep, absolutely.
And this is one of the things that John Greenwald didn't point out. I'm surprised that he didn't, because he knows that, or must know that. Just as an aside, and again, I don't want to be in a personal attack, but people like John Greenwald are very accepting and overly accepting of what they receive, and he's developed a very cozy relationship with government agencies that feed him and his repository, and he doesn't want to upset the apple cart. In fact, in one communication with me, what few he's had with me, he said that he finds the way that I deal with the FOIA folks to be abrasive. And I started laughing. I mean, if you don't push them a little bit, Frank, they won't do anything.
I've heard stories about Robert Todd. I'm not sure how familiar you are with his background, and you're a charmer compared to him, from what I understand.
Yes, so I'm a charmer. So when I hear John Greenwald saying that I should treat them with more respect and that I'm a bit brash with them, it tells me that he's too trusting of them and that he doesn't want to upset his cozy relationship with them. That much is very clear.
Now, we've talked a little bit privately before the show about what's next. My feeling is if these FOIAs these DIRDs are out there, and none of them are classified, let's get them all out there. Let's find a way to get them all released. Some others that aren't in this release have been out before, but not all of them. Very interesting stuff. And I think it would likely pretty well prove and lock down that there's no question that ATIP was a UFO program. Again, I had the graphic up earlier. Let's see, an introduction to the statistical Drake equation. What's the military application on that? Warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions. I mean, clearly they're trying to figure out. Obviously, some military applications if they can be developed. But at the same time, they're clearly talking about UFOs and how some sort of advanced ET can get here and from where they're coming from. That's
no doubt about it.
I mean, even without reading the papers, and I would love to read some of these papers, even without reading these papers, it's pretty obvious just from the titles the direction they're going in.
One of the things I found kind of interesting was that some of the material, though, that I received didn't relate to weaponry at all. It related to health benefit and medical benefit. So when Susan Gogue at the Pentagon says that these are strictly related to advanced weaponry programs, at least 20 pages related to the use of memory metal in the human body.
Yeah, biomaterials.
In the body as a biomaterial, right.
And that has been something that we've gotten anecdotally from UFO witnesses and whatnot. People have said that they've actually been on these ships and they can sort of like literally plug in. And
yes.
I've no doubt that guys like Hal Puthoff are aware of that, and that was part of what they were looking for.
Well, the whole thing about morphing metal is a very deep subject, and I don't want to get too far out into the weeds. But there's a lot of applications aeronautically that memory metal could help us with. For instance, as a self-healing metal, if it would be able to resist physical impact and physical intrusion on the metal by healing itself back up. Also, wings that can fold up on themselves, actuators that are used in aerospace systems. I mean, there's dozens of ways that memory metal can be used in space. And so, again, as they blend these ET-inspired technologies into advanced aerospace metallurgy and material science, it becomes more and more difficult to understand what became first, the chicken or the egg.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what's going on here. And I'm confident, though, that once we sort through all of this confusion, that what we've been given really is some extraordinary reports, and I think that they are based on our studies of extraterrestrial hardware. There's just not a doubt in my mind about it. The other curious thing to me is, why isn't the Pentagon getting back to me? Why is it this Susan Gogue doesn't, talk to me? Do you have any ideas why she might not be?
I'm not sure, except that they did not like all the attention that your article got.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And that it makes them have to work, makes them have to do things, makes them have to respond.
Do we know if John Greenwald knows her? Do we know if John Greenwald of the Black Vault has talked to her personally? Or if he knows her?
That I don't know. That I don't know. I do believe he's dealt with her. He may very well have talked to her. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Just don't know.
But the good thing is that his debunking is fairly easily debunked once you look past the surface. So that's all I've got to say about that. Those three nails are nothing, basically.
Well, when he began one of his videos by talking about a graphic that I used. That he found that to be offensive.
Yeah, well, he seems to have an issue with illustrations. He's mentioned that.
Yes,
there's another story that's floating around that he's got an issue with regarding just an illustration. I mean, it's like, come on,
Well, maybe I will in future articles put for illustrative purposes only when I put a picture of a flying saucer up. I mean, for heaven's sake, if people don't know that that's just to represent something and isn't the actual thing itself. And there was those kind of little picayune things that I realized this is a fellow that is very territorial. He is the guy that does FOIA. I frankly didn't know him well or really at all. And I knew of him and of his work prior. And actually was hoping to work with him cooperatively, but he instead viewed me as some sort of a threat in some strange way. And Frank, you know that I share leads and information with people freely, as you've done with me over the years, many, many times, and I'm very appreciative of that. And and you know that. And I think a lot of the folks in this field, if you can call it that, are just working against one another. And it's a field that is wrought with personality and politics and all kind of issues. And I've seen it firsthand with this Mr. Greenwald, someone I was hoping would be able to offer insight and work with me instead of at a cross purpose. I'm kind of surprised.
Well, so, sometimes controversy sells too, and it is drawing some attention to your stuff. Even
a little bit.
And again, his response kind of betrays, quite frankly, how little he knows about the actual subject. So, so you got that going for you too.
One of the things that he needs to understand is that this is as much a science and engineering issue as it is a Freedom of Information Act issue, and that we need to kind of work multidisciplinary and a multi-pronged approach on this, and that the answers may not be just from Susan Gogue and the Pentagon, and in fact the answers probably won't be coming from them, and so we have to work around that and use that information as best as we can, And I kind of wanted to wind this up by telling you where I'm going in the direction on all this.
Yeah, I'm curious
I
about
have
that.
found, as you know, some of the names of these scientists that wrote some of these articles, and they are approachable. And my next article, or perhaps the one after that, will talk about that. But just to give you a little bit of a heads up, I have reached one fellow that was particularly informative, who is in academia and is a theoretical physicist who has been contracted to government over the years. And he explains that when he's retained to do work like this, they don't ask questions. They don't need to know backstory. They don't need to know the ultimate aim, oftentimes, of their work. It's given to them and guided to them by people in government, and they're provided what they need to know to do their work and nothing more. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit more in the future, but it's going to become clear why it is that some of the folks that work on this material truly don't know why they're working on it. And it's kind of remarkable how in the real world compartmentalization works in a science and engineering company. In the real world, how it looks inside Lockheed or Boeing, and how these guys actually work on these kinds of projects. And I think it's going to be very surprising to people in the UFO community that are a bit naive about these kind of things. And I think it's going to be very helpful to understand what's been going on with all of this recently. So more to come.
Good. We're looking forward to it. And you seem to be, since you started the website, roughly a good 2,000 plus word article every couple months. That seems to be about So I guess we'll look for this, sometime. The last article obviously was last month now. So maybe something in April?
I think so, in late April. We'll look forward to the next chapter in this crazy story. And it is going to center around the actual scientists that did the reports. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the missing thing here. And it's going to kind of come full circle and help us to understand what's been going on. But I think maybe what I want to do first is take a couple of weeks to take a breather.
Take a spring break.
Because this has been overwhelming in so many different ways. And, I have a business and a life and a family, and this is a remarkable story, but I need to probably take a little bit of a breather and then re-enter, as you say, later on, probably in April, and dive back in.
Good. And one last question for you. I mean, we've talked about Roswell, and you're obviously a Roswell believer based on the witnesses that you've talked to, and plenty of other evidence, including what happened in the aftermath as far as advancements in technology. Are there any other crash stories that you particularly like that you think, there's something here?
What a great question. People always think Tony's only into Roswell. There are two. Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, in the late 60s, there was a craft that had crashed in Kecksburg. There's a researcher, great researcher named Stan Gordon. If anyone is interested, look him up on the net. And he's done some excellent work on that particular crash, which was believed to have possibly been a Russian satellite. James Oberg believed that, but now even he doesn't. So that is one of...
Leslie Kean did a little bit of work on that one, too.
Work on that as well. And, in fact, some really interesting work on that. So that's a whole other thing. And then, of course, Bentwaters, Rendlesham Forest, 1980, December 1980, is another UFO event that I've been studying. Have not talked to anyone about much because it so happens that, you'll be the first to hear it.
Yeah, John Burroughs has been on.
Security guards, actually, he was the security manager for Bentwaters, lives in my town here in Florida.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And I'm going to, in the age of COVID, we can't make site visits, but I would very much like to meet with this gentleman who knows much and has said very little. And so that is another UFO event that's of real interest to me. So, yeah, Kecksburg and Rendlesham.
Okay.
I think are real interesting.
John, you should reach out to John. You should reach out to John as well if you're interested.
John Burroughs. Those are probably two crashes you're interested in as well.
Oh, definitely. Rendlesham I like quite a bit. When I started, what I was really trying to do was kind of go where not a lot of people were going. So I avoided certain big cases, even Roswell and some other big cases, just because there were plenty of people already on it. And let me see if I could find something that wasn't being looked for. But just from knowing John and having him on the show multiple times. If you haven't listened to those shows, those would be a couple shows worth listening to.
Well, you're like me. We work around the edges, and sometimes that's how you find the truth.
Yep.
But hey, Frank, so much. Really appreciate all the time and the ability to talk to your listeners, and let's do this again.
Yeah, it was great. Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about the Socorro case, which always keeps coming back. Yep.
That.
A fantastic story that you followed up on, and I think you found the truth on the case. A lot of people still disagree with that, and plenty of other things. And the Valet book coming up, and who knows what else might happen. There's always wild cards in this field. So, Tony, this was fantastic. I think we covered really what anybody would need to know about this in enough detail. They've got a really good idea of what's happened up to this point and what to look for in the future. So thank you so much. Long overdue.
And we will definitely visit again.
Thanks a lot, Tony. You were fantastic. Thank you so much.
And have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. And you have a great weekend. Thanks a lot now. Bye-bye.